Welcome to a special edition of How to Grow a CMO, the podcast from TMP that helps you become a better marketing leader. This episode was recorded live at the Century Club in Soho, London in November 2025. I'll start off with Leah, if that's okay. We're going to start off with a personal question. So if you could start by telling a story from your childhood that shaped who you are today.
Yeah, I think probably it would be a moment in time when I was at university. So maybe not childhood, slightly older. I had just moved away from home. So I'm originally from Dublin and I moved to Edinburgh. And I always knew that I wanted to go somewhere different. I think I grew up in like a very small environment, small town, and I always knew I wanted to be away. I didn't want to go and do arts at UCD with everybody else that I went to school with. And I applied for university. I didn't tell anyone. So I didn't tell my parents. And I was 16 at the time when I did that. And I was accepted into university at the age of 17 on an unconditional offer and still kept it a secret. Didn't tell anyone, but I was determined that I was going to go. So I worked 3 or 4 jobs. I worked in a stables. I worked in a bar and I worked in a restaurant. And I saved for about 18 months. Not enough. I was very ambitious. Did not save enough money. And eventually had to admit to my parents that I was leaving. And that I wasn't going to do my leaving cert. And I wasn't going to go to university in Ireland. I was going to go away to Edinburgh. And I needed money. So please could I have some money to go and live in another country? And I'm very sorry that I didn't tell you the truth. And I didn't tell you that I was leaving. And I think that experience, obviously I moved to a new country and I cried for about 6 weeks. And my parents wouldn't let me come home for 6 months. And that, I think, really shaped me as a person today because it's made me very determined. And it's also made me realize that decisions have consequences, for one. And when you're 17 and you go to uni and realize that you can't drink or party with anybody else and that you're alone, that's a pretty big consequence. And it also really taught me, and this feels like a big LinkedIn post about like why something taught me something, but I think it really taught me to have a lot of patience and understand that I'm a very driven, determined person. And those people aren't always the loudest in the room. Those people don't always tell everybody what they're doing all the time. They don't always post on LinkedIn. They don't always come and do panels or do podcasts, and you don't have to tell everybody what your dreams are. You don't have to tell everybody what your ambition is. You just have to know what it is and what you want the result to be, and you can do it. But don't lie to your parents about going to university.
Thank you, Leah. God, who wants to follow that? Right. Tricia, do you mind? Would you be able to follow that story that shaped who you are?
Yes. So, similarly, I'm not sure if I was a child at the time. I was probably mid to late teens. But it was the first time I went skiing and we were in Switzerland and I didn't have any lessons and I was sort of at the bottom of the slope and kind of really scared of going to the top and coming down, and sort of got to about day 2 or 3 of this and watching these tiny little children zipping down, no fear. And I felt like a complete and utter idiot just standing at the bottom of the slope. So eventually I was like, right, I got on the chairlift. I went all the way to the top and I'm like, I am skiing down the slope. No one is coming to rescue me. I am making my way down all by myself. And so I did, felt actually very pleased with myself. But I think that I always go back to that story from time to time over the years, because I think the lesson it taught me is that there's always going to be a mountain to climb. And in a lot of ways, it's not as insurmountable as you first assume that it's going to be. And it's just really kind of taking a step back and taking that deep breath and going, okay, I'm going to give this a try and I'm going to go for it. And you find a way to come down. Now, I snowplowed all the way down, so it It wasn't like I was kind of zigzagging. I totally snowplowed all the way down, but I made it down, which is the moral to the story. So, and I think throughout my career over the years, and even to this day, there are still mountains to climb, but it's actually finding that inner strength to say, okay, I'm going to find a way to make it through it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tricia. And maybe that's a lesson we can carry through to the third section about annual planning as well. Rachel, would you mind going next as well, Mr.
No, not at all. I left school at 16 and my mother was not particularly pleased about that. My mother thought education was a gift. And I decided that I can work my way up. So I left school at 16 and I took my Saturday job very seriously and went full time. It was for Next. There are other clothing stores, but it was for Next. But after a year, I was sort of thinking, I've got this now. I should do something else. And I was always pretty good with numbers. And I thought, I'd quite like to be an accountant. So my mother helped me. She worked for the MOD. She got me an intro into British aerospace. The only thing I had going for me at the time is that I learnt calligraphy. So I handwrote a very short CV, my wonderful experience at Next, and all the things I could do and all the things I'd learnt. And I sent it into a contact at British Aerospace who was actually the financial controller. And I met him and he said I had to meet someone who could write like this. So using the only strength I had, and I met him and he said, you're not coming in on a youth training scheme. And yes, I am that old that we used to have youth training schemes. I'm not coming on a youth training scheme and you're not coming in as a grad, you're something in the middle. But he gave me a shot. And I joined and I waded through credit control and I did purchase ledger but he sent me back to college. So I went, back to college one day a week and did an MBQ and they offered to sponsor me through university. But I thought, I want to be a chartered accountant. And I then had this vision that I'd be a chartered accountant in the Cayman Islands on the beach. And I had a new vision. And so I said, I'm going to leave and I'm going to go to university. Well, while this was happening, on a Wednesday night, I met a guy in a pub. His name was David, and he started chatting. It was the worst shut-up line in the world. He actually said, I wish you'd gone to the toilet earlier. Who says that? But it was because I'd have had to walk past him. So I met David. I was 19. I met David. I was married within a year. And that was okay. The plan was back on track. He was moving to Manchester. I was going to go to Manchester University using my MBQ. And I would go there. That was December. By the end of January, I wasn't feeling so well. And I was 20 years old and I found out I was pregnant. Had to go back to my mother, who at this point had weathered the storm of she's getting married at 20, went back and told her I was pregnant. And at that point, she said to me, you have two choices. It's very straightforward, my mother, two choices. I will help you stay at home and be a mum, if that's what you want. Or I will help you go back to university and carry on the path. And I think that shaped me completely. The choice, being given that choice as an individual was overwhelming. So I had my wonderful daughter, Charlotte. I went back to university. I didn't go to Manchester. I went to Reading so that we could all live at home and I could still do my thing. I went through, got an internship at Coopers & Lybrand. The story ends that I actually thought when I was awarded a grad place, maybe I'll defer that for a year and have a go at marketing as a recommendation of my course director. And the rest is history. But, the thing I am grateful for and I try to offer is choice.
Thank you, Rachel. That was a phenomenal story. Brendan, you mind just sharing your story as well?
Yeah, mine is more childhood, I guess. And that was... when I was, I guess, the ages 9 to 11, my parents started the process of divorce. And my father, he left with a young woman, and my mom, they both remarried really quickly. So clearly, the marriage wasn't going well. And then my mom and my stepfather had 2 more kids in rapid succession. So it's 4 of us now. And I was the younger of and then a 13-year gap, a 12 to 13-year gap. So as my mom was distracted with 2 young babies, a new marriage, and my father was off with Karen, doing his thing. It was an interesting upbringing because, I was loved, in the concept of love, but in many ways I was also kind of alone, and which I'm fine with. I'm not, going to go through therapy for it. But I think in terms of what it taught me as an adult and as a professional is that, you have to kind of figure things out, and there's no playbook for everything, right? And you would think that, going through your professional life, like there's a certain way to do things, and that you have to follow that kind of rule of how it's supposed to go. And I always think of it as a reminder that there is no one right way of doing things, and you can, within the ethical boundaries, pretty much anything is on the table. And that allows you to create options, generate options of how things can go, and allows you to be really imaginative in the things that you want to accomplish. So it's a good reminder that, life is kind of what you make of it, and there's no right way of going, and you just kind of try to do the right thing and serve your objectives of what you're trying to accomplish. And
thank you. And for amazing stories. And I think ice well and truly broken as well. This one, I love asking that question. So I think so much of what we think about as marketers obviously is marketing, but yet there is so much more to the role to success, to leading people, that comes down to quite fundamental human traits. So thank you for sharing so generously all of that. Out of interest, obviously, Rachel, you mentioned you wanted to be a chartered accountant when you were growing up. And I love that your image of a chartered accountant was hanging out on the beach in the Cayman Islands, which is probably not the first image that most people leap to. Tricia, what about you? Did you have any thoughts about, what you might have done other than marketing?
Yes, I think mine was shaped by family. So I think if you come from a Caribbean family, or maybe, from an African family yourself, it's very much kind of doctor or lawyer or something like that, right? So when I was a child, I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. And no offense to anyone who's in the legal profession watches this, but I couldn't imagine anything more boring. So throughout my childhood, growing up thinking that, and I remember when I first decided to get into marketing through my degree at university, I did a Spanish as my major and journalism as my minor at Leeds. And that course got me to explore all aspects, actually, of communication. So PR, marketing, all elements of it, advertising. And I settled on marketing. I remember when I got into that thinking, I could not imagine in a million years being a lawyer. It just wasn't for me. But I think it's that family expectation that kind of shaped that thought that was what I was going to do. But yes, just it would not have been for me at all.
Fair enough. Oh, I'm very glad we saved you from accountancy and law between the two of you. I think we've done very well there. Out of interest, these stories that you kindly shared, Leah, moving away and taking such a huge personal risk at such a young age, does that result in any kind of personal philosophy or kind of mantra that you now live by?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I've been a leader now for almost a decade, and I think it happens a lot in marketing and in brand particularly, and in the creative worlds. A lot of people think that my job is to be really creative. It's absolutely not. My job is to foster the right environments for the creatives to be creative. I can write some copy and that's about it. I mean, the people at TMP will know that. It gets edited and changed quite a lot. And for me, it's my mantra that I kind of live by is that everybody needs to be noticed, affirmed, and needed. So everybody needs to feel those things. And my job as a leader is to make sure that everyone feels that in every interaction, that they feel that I'm listening to them, that they feel they have a voice, that they feel a part of something. And I think that learning that professionally has also taught me to adopt that in my personal life as well, and has taught me to be very open and listen and try and understand what's happening behind what people are saying. So I think that's probably what my personal professional mantra would be.
What about you, Tricia? Is there something that in particular has stayed with you from your skiing incident?
I think the main thing really that I think I still tap into to this day is just having that self-belief and not giving up. So I think it's very easy, even to this day, have those moments and you kind of walk into a scenario in a room with people where you feel perhaps, maybe not quite confident enough to go and put, your best ideas forward or put yourself forward, because you have people who sit in front of you and you're thinking, gosh, they're really impressive. And I feel like don't quite maybe measure up. But then I think it's the thing from that experience that tap into is just actually, you've got to believe in yourself. You've got to believe in confidence. And over the years, and I have been in marketing for a long time now, so I do have a number of years experience behind me of being able to tap into those past successes, those things that I've done to kind of reaffirm that I know what I'm doing. I know what I'm talking about. I have a background, a long list of things that I can demonstrate where I have been successful, where I have delivered this. So I'm sure everyone in this room has those moments, those sort of crisis of confidence. And I don't think that ever completely goes away, but you do learn to, I suppose, overcome or manage your way through that. And I think that's what, the skiing experience taught me. It was kind of, right, I'm going to believe in myself. I'm going to back myself to come down that mountain. And it actually is quite laughable when I talk about the mountain because it was really only a nursery slope when you look back on it. So it's grandiose to say mountain, but it was only a nursery slope. But yeah, it's backing yourself to be successful.
Fantastic. Thank you, Tricia. So I think we've now got to know our guests pretty well, hopefully. And we're going to start moving on to our professional lives as marketers, talking about the big themes of today. So the one that I want to tackle first up, let's just tackle it head on, is obviously AI. But I wanted to take a slightly different approach to it. I wanted to ask Rachel, what was the first time where you heard about or you encountered AI?
I worked for a two-tier distribution company. I was head of demand gen. It was a scale-up business out of San Francisco. And I owned the e-commerce number. I'm really doing that next best action. And so, we would have returned to it to get really more around machine learning, but really around machine learning to help infuse in that buyer journey. It went from free trial, a freemium model, through to purchase. And so that was, oh my goodness, that was 15 years ago. But after that, I went to SAS, a company SAS, not Surfers Against Sewage, as some of you may know, or the airline, but a really well-known deep analytical company, started by a guy called Dr. Goodnight in the 70s. And he sounds like a Bond villain. He sounds so cool, doesn't he? Dr. Goodnight. And I remember when I joined SAS, listening to some of the talks that he gave, and it was just as that machine learning, AI, tipping point, discussing it differently. And I remember Dr. Goodnight giving a presentation and he turned around and he went to Bob, the CTO. Bob, didn't we do that in 1976? And I just remember thinking, that transition from, machine learning, those next best actions using data and analytics to predict that have been done right back into the 70s, and specifically in industries like banking and looking at, really important things like risk. So, and that's what SAS as a company had a core value proposition in and had grown from there. So I guess, 15, up to nearly 15 years ago to start with.
Fascinating. I think there's something there. I'm a kind of a part-time linguist on side. I know, yes, I should put on my dating profile. But I think it's fascinating how the way that we use language, definitions of the words we use really do reflect the moods of the times and how our understanding of that concept has changed. So AI, obviously, today, when we talk about it, really does 99% of the time mean generative AI. And suddenly there is now AI and there is machine learning. And I can't wait for what AI might mean next as well, as we've seen kind of the next wave beyond generative AI as well. So I think that's a lovely illustration that AI is not a new thing. AI has been around probably since the 60s, probably earlier, as Dr. Goodnight would shout at us all to remind us. So thank you very much, Rachel. Tricia, obviously you work for Capgemini, an amazing business at the forefront of a lot of this sort of thinking. What are the trends that you're seeing at the moment, either internally or externally in the buying world?
So I think it's fair to say over the last few years and even predating my time at Capgemini, I think the conversation has been framed much more. Everyone feels that they have to have AI or do something with AI. It's kind of, we've got to have it even if we don't actually yet figure out how we're going to scale it or, how we're going to implement it across our enterprise. And I think what I'm seeing more recently is people looking at, well, how do we make it work best for us? How do we make it profitable? How do we use it in a way that's cost effective and efficient and gives us productivity gains? So it's more, how do we make AI work for us? How do we make AI more human, more real, more realistic to, our day to day, but how do we make that into a profitable outcome for the business?
Yeah. That to me is fascinating as well. The idea of pricing generative AI now is, of the four Ps, of the four marketing Ps, almost the most exciting, because it is a technology we don't know how to price, completely changes the cost structure of serving customers as well. So I think there's an awful lot of money to be won and lost in that space, but when we get that right. What about you, Brendan? What are the kind of the impacts that you're expecting to see unfold over the next few years?
The thing that I really want to see is I want to see there be no more smartphones. That's the thing. I'm really looking forward to whatever the thing is that comes next that gets the phone out of our hand. And I don't necessarily mean that I want us all to start wearing, shields or whatever that may be. And especially those of you who have young kids, you have to think for a minute, and maybe you have, but if you're crashing on something or answering a late email and there's like this thing, and if you put yourself in your kid's mind, like they know you by looking at the backside of your phone. So the last thing I want is like for my kids to grow up and think that part of their memory of their father was from the backside of this orange iPhone case over here, which is very likely, going to be part of it. So there's got to be something else out there. And, I'm going to try to do it without saying the word AI, but of course, AI, machine learning, and the technical sophistication and the speed that we're going to get out of the pace of innovation right now is going to contribute to that. But I'm really looking forward to whatever comes next from personal computing and how we can kind of get out of this current sort of era that we're in the bigger scheme of consumer technology.
Yeah, I love that. So we've touched on pricing. Now you're touching on product as well. And obviously, a lot of people are experimenting with form factors and products for the current wave of technology. Leah, what about you? What are you seeing that's important at the moment, potential consequences of it?
I guess what I'm seeing is that I think we are, and this will not be news to anybody in this room because we're all marketers, but what I'm seeing is I think we are returning to tangible things, returning to real moments. And I think just what Brendan was saying about, how young people are experiencing the world today, is technology is nothing new for them. They're being kind of born and raised on it. For me, a child of the 80s, technology, like I'm a millennial, we grew up with it. It became like a really exciting thing. I'm not bored by it, but I think a lot of people are becoming bored by technology now, and they want to experience something in real life. They want to touch something. They want to connect physically with people, because that's not a world that they grew up with. Whereas I love being on my phone all the time and like WhatsApping everybody. Like I don't want to meet anybody in person or do anything in person. Still a novelty for me.
Okay, so we talked a little bit there around what might change, but Rachel, a good friend of yours, a guy called Jeff, once said, there are people constantly asking me what's going to change in the next 10 years, but not enough people ask me what won't, and that's probably a more important question. So from that lens, what are the things that you think won't change anytime soon? What are the fundamentals, perhaps, that will remain?
I was talking to someone earlier. I think as we look at AI and specifically agentic, I'm hoping the term just becomes AI. We can start that campaign. But I think if we look at agentic and really the ability to insert into processes, and so really build them as part of our organization with roles and responsibility, the thing for me that will not change, as speaking to a room full of marketeers, is having, your experience, your expertise, and your ability to build relationships and through that, advise on strategy. So, for me, that's not going to change. And I use the analogy of a lawyer. I'm sorry, Trish. Lawyers are fun too. So I use the analogy of a lawyer. Lots of the work, we see, can be taken by AI in looking at, specific laws, referencing lots of the work that would be done, take months to build a big case by clerks, etc. That could be done with AI today and could be checked. But you're not going to take an AI into the courtroom with you. That experience. And equating marketing experience, I think when you're building those relationships, I work in partner marketing at the moment, building those relationships with partners, that's a human relationship. And, having that expertise to offer how to build that strategy together, how to really elevate those value propositions through your experience, I don't believe that can change. And I think we just have to be mindful, though, how we instill the next generation, talking about how to grow a CMO, instill the next generation and give them the experience to get there, that we aren't removing all of these fundamentals and great learnings with technology to enable the next generation to have that experience and keep that.
Yeah, absolutely. They're reflecting as well on what you and Leah said. There's a lot that happens in research around AI about, how do you kind of future-proof yourself in terms of skills, but actually in terms of the experiences as well. It's perhaps a slightly under-researched area. Okay, good. So, Brendan, thinking about then the role of marketing today and how that kind of is impacting how you set up teams, the way you organize your marketing function in the business. What are the kind of second order consequences then? What does it mean for how you're behaving as a CMO?
I'm going to tie it back, of course, to AI. Whenever it became a thing about 3 years ago, and the first fear factor was that it was going to make marketing go away. It was going to make communications go away. It was going to make coders go away. I was like, okay, well, this is red alert for this, because not only for my own job or whatever, but you have to make sure that you get ahead of it, because it can either sink you or it can make you way better. And so what we did as a team is we got in front of it really quickly and figured out, okay, how can this make us better and faster and do more interesting things and take more risk? And, everything from, I guess we organized it in terms of education, culture, and policy/tools. There's the 3 different components. So first off is like creating a culture of acceptance, like you're not cheating if you use AI. In fact, it's encouraged. So, and all of our QBRs, I'm looking at my team over here, and all of our QBRs, everybody has an obligation to show like how they incorporated AI into the different programs that we did the previous quarter. So that's got to be a specific policy. And hopefully in the future, I won't have to do a fine point on it. But for now, you have to be super intentional on it. So that's culturally, how do you do it? Secondly, I appointed back, at the very beginning, an AI ambassador on the team, and somebody who could just be really focused on, skimming all the news, putting in Slack, like what are the important things that we all need to know about it? What are the latest releases? What do we all need to know? So the education component of helping the team feel smart and supported, so that we all knew what we were doing, and then we could then take the tools and make really interesting work. Some of the stuff has been awesome, and some of the stuff has been ridiculous flops. But encouraging it and telling the team, like, let's, that's cool. Like, let's not do that again.
Yeah.
And then finally, policy and tools is, next year, everybody is going to have AI as part of their performance review, and make sure that it somehow filters through that, so that there's something that everybody is doing that incorporates it. So you have to embrace it. And then tools is making sure that it's available to everybody, either through Copilot or an open AI license, getting it available to everybody so that we're all working with it and getting ahead of it, making our work better, and just trying to be leaders within the company. Because it's silly to think that all of our jobs are going away, because that clearly hasn't happened. But it has made our work more interesting, faster, and more effective. We're able to do more, and the team's really engaged on it.
That's fascinating. So I think one of the things I heard there was that I hear a lot from the CMOs I speak to is not just giving your teams permission to use it. I've come across a lot of organizations that have rolled out a platform to various different people, and then they haven't seen adoption. So they've given people the access without seeing the adoption off the back of it. And part of that, I think a huge part of that, is you hear so much around the impact that AI will have on teams, on organizations, on wider society, but not enough people are talking about it at an individual level. How do you change people's mindset to see the benefits that they get as an individual? There was a lovely quote the other day from, might be an Andre Carpathy or someone who's quite prominent in the space, saying, we're now living in an age where an individual has the highest leverage of any moment in history, which I think is interesting for 2 things. One, because of the idea behind it, and 2, it's actually a legitimate use of the word leverage, which in B2B is a rare thing. So let's make it a little bit more kind of practical then, maybe now. So one of the things I think is really important to me is giving people something they can kind of go away and think about or do tomorrow, when they go back to their day jobs tomorrow from this. So perhaps starting with you, Leah, do you have any practical, what are the most kind of useful practical tips that you've learned that you'd love to pass on to aspiring CMOs?
I think for me, the most practical thing that anybody who is like up and coming or, is on their kind of career journey is that, and I'm sure somebody else is probably going to say this and you've all heard this, is that there is no direct route. I'm going to do a callback to my original story and probably shock you all about what I went to university to do was to learn bookbinding. So it wasn't marketing, it wasn't business, it wasn't economic, it wasn't anything that anybody expected. I wanted to physically learn how to make books, and Edinburgh had the oldest printing press in the world. And that's why I wanted to go. And adamant I was going to make books. I'm like, oh God. It's so embarrassing now. But during that course, because they forced me to do other things like publishing business and learn about things, I learned about marketing and was really interested in it. And then I left university and didn't touch a book. Didn't want to work in publishing, didn't want to touch a book. Worked in the music industry, trained to be a hairdresser, did lots of different things, worked in bars, but always kind of like fell in love with telling people stories. And I think that's probably what drew me to making books, because I really loved books as a child and still do as an adult. And also at the time that I was at university was the kind of the beginning of the ebook. And the whole kind of like Twilight saga that happened, where she wrote the first book and the second book got leaked, and then it got leaked on ebooks. And that's how old I am, is that ebooks were new. And I was really interested in like the rapid storytelling around that. So went and did lots of different jobs, worked in PR, and then also kind of just found myself in social media, and then never thought I would be where I am now, doing brand communications or working in a big kind of organization. That would be my one. I guess that's not a practical tip, actually, that there's no direct route. But I guess that's my one kind of takeaway. My one piece of advice is that if there's opportunities to go sideways, if there's opportunities to do something different, like I sit here as, very interested in brand communications, but actually what I'm finding that I love is capabilities and org design, and probably going to shoot myself in the foot if anybody that I work with is watching this, but like chief of staff or that kind of world, strategy world. I never thought I would be interested in that. I was like, I want to make TV ads. I want to do all the cool stuff. And now I'm like, I want to move people where they're best placed and be efficient and save the company money and do all of these things. So if there's opportunities to do different things to what you think you should be doing, take them. That would be my one piece of advice.
Good. Okay. So I hopefully I've left enough time for the section you've all been waiting for, which is annual planning. Now, just before I ask anyone about this, so I share the questions with guests beforehand to say, which of these are you happy to answer? And particularly obviously around personal questions, want to make sure that everyone's comfortable to answer them. Rachel was very generous and says she's very happy to answer pretty much any question, but has left the annual planning section completely blank. So I think we're definitely going to have to ask Rachel a question about it. But first, let's start with Tricia. So what is your advice? We know that annual planning can be difficult, which might be an understatement, but what's your advice for anyone going through it or about to start annual planning?
I mean, I don't think my advice is rocket science at the end of the day. And I think I'll be telling everyone exactly what they probably already know. But I think the most crucial thing, certainly in my world, is making sure that the sales and marketing priorities are aligned, and that we're all traveling in the same direction. Because without that, I think, you are then at risk of getting quarter of the way through the year, halfway through the year, presenting your fantastic metrics that to you are amazing and look at what we've done. And then the business like, well, how does that support our growth that we want to achieve in XYZ area? Because it's not linking back to anything that they are focused on. So I think that's really key. And it's that old thing of sales and marketing alignment, right? I think we all hear that in this room time and time again, but it never goes away. And it's absolutely key. It's part of that annual planning for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I think that probably speaks to the fact that it's not a thing that happens at a moment in the year. Presumably, to get that kind of alignment, you have to be building relationships. And you said, through the process.
Absolutely. And I'd add to that as well is that I don't know about you guys, but certainly it's an ongoing conversation throughout the year. It's not a moment in time. I would love if there's anyone in this room who can say, I did my plan in October and it remains the plan the following October. So it's an ongoing conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Brendan, what about you? Have you any advice from the CMO's chair about annual planning?
the one rule is that we do, like, you know where you want to land for the year, but you really get specific in 6-month increments, because to the point of, like, you know, if I were to guess what's going to be happening in September of 2026, and I was going to set budget to it and create a tactical activation plan about something like that, that's just a complete waste of time. But I do know what's going on in the first half of next year pretty specifically, and maybe it's just the company that where I work and how we operate, but I can get very tactical with an annual strategy and bring that to life with budget, and then not try to dedicate too much time in that compressed, you know, planning environment that we have to trying to figure out what's going to happen in the next fall. And then we meet again in the summer as a leadership team, and we start to sketch it out how it's going to go. It's a great call about being aligned. We're actually meeting 2 weeks from now in New York, and the team's coming together. We were talking about it yesterday. You know, always making sure that sales and marketing is aligned, because it could be so embarrassing to show up and say, oh, we did this thing, and everyone's silent on the line. They're like, what is that? Don't care. You know, it's interesting also, I mean, just to say it, that doing brand campaign like we did this year, where it's big and high level and about love, you know, that is extra work for marketing to try to make sure that, like, they understood, they see the value. So I look at my colleague Ram over here, who oversees the operations team and like gives me all the analytics and stuff like that. You have to make sure when you do big brand work that it does pull through in the business. So, like, that's one thing that we're going to make sure that we do, because, you know, it's not something that pulls through Salesforce. You're not going to have a bunch of form fills of people who, you know, are excited about love and commerce, right? So, it's an extra hard effort for us to do that, but we have to do it because brand is so important of keeping, you know, the relevance, the conversation going while you go through and you pin down all the work that happens at the bottom of the funnel.
Absolutely. And just out of interest, a challenge that some people might face there, when you said, which I think is absolutely sensible, you can plan in some detail tactically for the first 6 months, but maybe not so much for the second 6 months. Do you ever get pushback from CFO, anybody else? Actually, no, we need to know how this budget will be spent in more detail.
Yeah. I mean, well, especially in the back half of the year, but, you know, we have a great team, actually, and Ram's team as well, that makes sure that throughout that first 6 months, we're being really strict and we're allocating everything that it needs to be. And then we're flexible. Like, one of my biggest pieces of advice for anybody in here who, you know, is interested in being a CMO, get close with your CFO. That was a big piece of advice that I got from a mentor of mine, and it pays off, because in the back half of the year, you know, if you have something that you can give back to the business in order to help, you know, with margin, or if you need to make an ask to say, hey, we need an investment to run some more ads, that relationship and that flexibility and being able to take and give is really important. So yeah, like, getting it done the first half of the year, that's fine. The second half of the year, being flexible, but also just communicating and building on that relationship with your leadership peers is really important.
Good. Is there anything you're kind of doing differently, Brendan, for annual planning 26?
Yeah, there is actually. It was funny when you're talking about getting close to the business, because the conversation we had yesterday. We're going to get the business priorities nailed down. We're going to do input from product marketing and go-to-market and get all that sorted out as a foundation. But then we're going to have comms and a couple of other colleagues who are a couple layers in the organization come in and lead a planning by themes exercise. And so we all kind of generally know what the themes are going to be. But it's a little bit different than us just going in and saying, like, here's, you know, this hard priority. So we're gonna try to do a little bit of generalization, and that just might be also specific to where we are as a company. We're operating in 2 segments. We have a retail media segment and a performance segment, and we need them to come together because there's just one team. So doing it by themes for us differently next year helps to pull together a cohesive message while making sure that we're paying off the segment priorities.
Yeah, it's great actually seeing somebody adapt the process in line with the strategy for the wider business. Great idea. Rachel, what about you? This can be your annual planning question. Is there anything you're doing differently for annual planning in 2020?
Well, firstly, I think we should ban the term annual plan.
Yes.
Because I do believe what Trish said, you know, and I always say to my peers, my team, you know, when you sort of say, what are we going to do next year? You know, has the customer changed? We haven't suddenly created a whole new load of stuff. You know, we can serve these customers in a certain way. They haven't gone away. So it has to be rolling. And we have quite a rigorous process, as you could imagine. But one thing I have done differently this year is we've had to bring in the operating model, because we have been looking at how we do use technology very seriously. And that can change how we operate. And so therefore, while we're planning, I've been looking, as I said, I look at partner marketing and marketplace, how we can cover and extend our reach of our partners, of those marketplace sellers, with a similar level of budget, with a similar level of resource. But how can we install that growth? We have ambitious growth targets. And so therefore, I think we had to look at coverage, had to look at how we operate with technology infused into it, and then build that into the plan to actually think, can I get to 40% growth? And how am I going to get to 40% growth, and work backwards also from that in a very realistic way?
Well, thank you for giving me permission never to mention the word annual planning again. Good. Okay, so as a closing question then, and Leah, I'm going to start with you if that's okay. What is one piece of advice that you'd give every marketing leader in this room today?
I think my one piece of advice for marketing leaders is stay the course. I think as a leader, you have a vision and you know what you want to achieve. Hopefully you're informed by the business and by what the capabilities are and what the industry is. I think we are thrown many different priorities, which is why we should ban planning. And I think stick to your vision, stick to the course. You can get there through many different ways, as long as you are very clear and you are being very clear about your vision to your team. That is the ultimate kindness that you can give any marketing department. And you can be transparent and say, we're not going to get there because we didn't get this funding, but we're going to get there because of this. We're going to do this instead. So I think as long as you're very steadfast in what your vision is, you stick to that. That is probably the best piece of advice I could give.
Tricia, what about yourself?
Yeah, so completely echo what Leah has said, but I guess to articulate a couple of examples, I won't name the organization, but remember sitting around the table, boardroom table in the leadership meeting, and having all of the execs around the table telling me what they think I should do and what marketing should be and whatever. And I had one of the execs in the room said, you would think that you're the marketing expert in the room. It seems like everybody else has taken that role. And I combine that with a feedback a colleague gave me when I first joined Accenture, which was, as long as you're able to justify the why and the what, and you can hold firm to that, then, you will get your stakeholders on board. So for me, it's remembering that you're the expert in the room. You're the one with the marketing experience. You're the one with the background, and all the people who are telling you what they think you should do are not the experts in the room. And as long as you can justify why you're doing what you're doing and be able to stand firm behind that, then, you should really kind of hold on to that and hold true to that.
Good, thank you. Rachel, what about yourself?
I'd celebrate your successes, because I think sometimes as marketeers, and I certainly think of myself like that, it's like cobbler's shoes, isn't it? We're getting on, we're doing our work, and we're doing amazing things, but we don't always take the time to celebrate our successes. And you don't want to be the annoying person waving the flag. Don't, tell it as a story. I think Trish mentioned, tell it as a story of how you have supported the business. And really, really tell that story, and tell it again until you're almost sick of telling it, but your audience has really got it. And I think that's super important. But alongside that, you really have to learn from failures. Don't be afraid of failure. And everyone hates failure. I mean, it's really easy to say learn from it. Everyone hates it, but, do take that as an opportunity, as that growth moment to not do it again, try not to do it again, and change something different. And I think I completely agree with what Leah said. Take the opportunity in that to move sideways when you look for growth, when you look for those successes. They could be to the side of you, they can be to the left of you, they can be right in front of you. But yeah.
Yeah, very good. I think that first point is one that comes up so often as well. Marketers just aren't very good at marketing, which is the situation we find ourselves in. Brendan, finally, what about one piece of advice you give every marketing leader in the room today?
Work with these talented individuals. No, your advice is tremendous. I learned something from each of you. You know, I don't know. This is kind of like a gimmick, but it's an easy one, I hope. If you report to your CMO or your CEO or whoever you report to, try to always go in there with a fresh data point. Be it, you know, something that they just may not know, and something that they may be able to take on to their own stakeholders. So I learned it from my wife, who's a North America CMO of a big company, and I heard her working from home talking to her CEO, and I was like, hey, that's a good idea. So I stole it. And every time I have my one-on-one with the CEO, I try to go in and give them a new data point on something, either if it's, what their LTV is of a certain product, or, whatever performance of something else, or what's happening with scraping of LLMs. I try to make sure that they see the marketing function as being data-driven, adding value to the organization, and worthy of being able to fund. So in some ways, it's echoing a lot of the comments here of making sure that you're selling the value of the organization. In other ways, it's just making sure that you're helping them stay informed and giving them new data points to work with moving forward.
I love that. Thank you. It's the first time I've heard that as a piece of advice. And he's absolutely brilliant. Thank you. Good. Okay. Well, just before we move on to questions from the audience then, can I just ask everyone to give a big round of applause for Julia Cox? Thank you. Yeah. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you. Good. Okay. So hands up. How long do we have for questions? Five minutes for questions. Yes, please. I'm sorry. I can't see any name badges.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing those insights. That was really powerful. My name's Hasina, and I wanted to ask a question to build upon kind of the squiggly career strategy insight that you shared. I'm sure, like a lot of us, we've all done stints in product and sales and marketing. I've even done a stint as a brain surgeon a long, long time ago. But then it feels like, from a seniority perspective, you need to put yourself in a box so that executives, other individuals can know what they can depend on for you. So what's your advice in terms of how to build that story, right? Like, it feels like there comes a point where you need to specialize. What's your advice in terms of telling that story, creating that career path for yourself, and kind of drawing everything together?
Just before we do answer that, you did a stint as a brain surgeon. Go on in the ring, just wanted to question.
At uni as well. So really, really long ago.
All right, lovely. So who would like to answer Hasina's question first?
Let's have a go.
Rachel, please. Yeah.
I think you have to decide at some point what your differentiator is, because we're never going to be successful, any of us, unless we're passionate about it and we're good at it. So I think you have to be really honest with yourself and decide, what is your true skill and what are you passionate about? So try and marry your skill with what you love and craft your story that you're going to go and tell upwards, sideways, outward, and keep telling it so that they understand what you stand for and what you can offer.
Somebody want to add anything else to that?
I mean, you mentioned putting yourself in a box and specializing. And I'd actually say I have not specialized at all in my career. I've always been a bit of a generalist, but that's enabled me to build my experience across all different strands of marketing. So I will describe myself as knowing enough about digital to be dangerous, but I would not want to put myself forward as a specialist in that area. But building on what Rachel said, I remember I've gone into lots of sideways paths, as you say, I've done product marketing. And I remember getting to a point where I thought, I don't want to do this. I want to actually go back to core B2B marketing. So I stopped. I gave up my job that I had. I went temping. I did lots of different work because I was determined that I was going to get back into that area. But I've stayed fairly generalist across the way. And I think that's given me a great background and great experience, and also generalist in terms of industry. So I have had recruiters over the years going, oh, your experience is in this area. And I'm like, well, actually, I think my skills are pretty transferable regardless of the industry and regardless of the sector. So I think you've got to actually push back against some of that categorization that people might have of you and where they think you fit. Because actually, if you've got those core marketing skills and strengths, they can be applied anywhere, I feel.
Thank you. Does anybody else have a question?
Thank you very much. I like that a brain surgeon decided to do something great in the world. My question is building on the previous one, actually. So AI aside, what skills would you advise an aspiring marketing leader to work on over the next few years?
I can take this one.
Go on, Leah.
Yeah, and I think it also applies to the first question as well. I think problem solving, that I think is the biggest skill that you need as a marketer. And I also think it's the biggest skill you need to grow in a business. Identifying who has a problem and how you can solve it. And that solves the problem of like, how do I put myself in a box, or the exec needs this, find out what's needed and then solve it. That would be, I think everybody as a marketer needs to know how to do that.
Yeah. And actually, I just build on that as well, actually. The particular element of problem solving, I think being able to decompose a problem is going to be incredibly valuable over the next few years as well. Good. Any other questions? Like maybe this might be the last one. Yes, please. Sorry, just a moment for the mic.
I'm currently giving unsolicited career advice to a 16-year-old creative boy. Can I ask for your help, please? In a world obsessed with AI and increasingly dominated by AI, what should I tell him to do?
Just encourage him to follow his passion.
Do that.
Yeah. I mean, don't try to force anything. Just do what you love and something good will come of it.
Thank you.
Yeah. There's so I did a stint studying experimental psychology at university. And one of the things I learned was actually about how the mind works. This idea that your mind and who you are isn't simply governed by the kind of small lump of matter between your ears, but actually it's all the tools that you have at your disposal, the people you meet, the way you can extend your own capabilities. And there's a theory called the extended mind, which talks about this brilliantly. But I would encourage them to try and get that kind of mindset, that everything out there, that all these new technologies are tools for him to use. They aren't tools to use him. Good. One final question. Sorry. Yes.
Yeah, my question's maybe for Brendan, or just interested in the kind of wider group, but you said some interesting stuff earlier just around AI and how you're getting the team to adopt it. But I guess it was more of a broader question around how you create space for teams to innovate versus sort of delivering the operational sort of BAU. So obviously busy teams, lots going on, and obviously the pace of change is so fast, and just, some tips around how you've managed that.
Well, the thing is like the teams know that they have to deliver something quality. And so you have to then encourage them to take risk within the context of knowing that they have to get something done that's high quality. So if you want to build a, crazy video using an AI, creative suite tool, and it gets panned, or I say no way, or someone else who runs the brand team says no way, then they have to be willing to accept that they've got to put in the extra hours to then figure something else out, or work with more people on the team to then deliver on what the objective is. So it's sort of, you run a company that isn't just like, throwing paint around and having fun, because at the end of the day, like, while you're allowed to take risk and do whatever you want to do to create something, you do have to actually deliver and get better at it. But, that's the idea, is that you take risk, you fail, you get better at it, you learn from it, and then you bring in the team and you figure something else out. But I just make sure that people know that it's supported, and that we aspire to do, and this may be controversial, but I aspire to do perfect work. Like the aspiration is that our work is going to be perfect, and it's going to be best in class and excellent. And by setting the expectation that it's got to be perfect, I'm not punishing people when it's not perfect, but the idea that people have to think of that is the bar, that it's got to be something that's amazing. It gets people to recognize that there's boundaries within what you do, and it's then how you manage the process. I'm not then saying this isn't perfect, leave. You say, all right, that's cool, I'm glad you did that. And that's interesting, and we learned something from it. Then you got to move on.
I would just add as well, I think a secret sauce is making the tools available and giving some space to learn the tools that infuses them into the day-to-day, so that you're learning on the job that you're doing as part of your BAU. And that's easier said than done. And, you can do learning and growth days, you can do the tools, but then you start to adopt it in your day-to-day and the usage grows. And so I think, for me, that's where we can really help our teams.
Yeah.
And I'd like to add that I literally just did it at the start of the week, because I sat at home as I was working from home, and I was thinking, do you know what? I feel like there's so many new tools and offers that's coming into our business, and things that I come to events like this and learn about, but I don't feel like my knowledge is where I want it to be. So I've actually just gone into my calendar and I've blocked out on a weekly basis, recurring half an hour AI immersion session, and I've done another sort of hour specifically on our offerings and tools within the business because I just want to improve my own learning. And I would encourage my team to do the same. Now, I'm going to have weeks when that doesn't work because I've got meetings, I've got other things to do. But if it's there in my calendar, it's like, okay, this is my time that's blocked out where I'm going to go and I'm going to dedicate that time to my self-learning.
I would also challenge you to think about, if we're talking about AI and innovation, think about it in a different way. Like, how can you use AI to automate something else that's not creative, that can give people the time to come together to be creative? So is there something else that you can look at in your department or your processes that can be automated, or you can use a tool for that? If being there together in a room or ideating or creating that space is really important for you, try it somewhere else, not in the creative process.
That's all we have time for, unfortunately. But again, a massive thank you to the guests, and thank you for the brilliant questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.